emergency and exits. As you know, you came in through this door here, which is an exit. We also have exits down the hall here and also through the committee room as well. Should there be an emergency, the mustering point is out here on the sidewalk in the parking lot in front of the building. Might also mention that washrooms are available. We share them with the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, just down the hall on the right. That being said, once again, welcome to our committee. The purpose here is to discuss issues of relevance to the electoral areas, and all decisions made here are brought forward to the board at the end of the month for ratification. Also like to acknowledge the fact that we are doing our business today on the traditional unceded territory of our very own Comox First Nations. Now to plow right into the agenda, we have a management report for receipt. Is there any discussion on the management report? We do. Director Hamir.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Chair. I just had a question on the last 3 items of the report that are mostly dated from 2018, and there's even one from 2016. And wondering what the status of those are, if we can take any of those off of the list. Yeah.
We're going to put James Warren on the spot here, acting CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just looking at the management report, then, we've got the 3 items you mentioned, one regarding the Freedom Mobile application for a proposed telecommunication tower.
Is anything happening with that?
I would want to check with our planning department, and I think with some of these matters are with other bodies, and so we're needing them to advance in that sense. So we can certainly make sure that these are as up to date. We do circulate this report through staff monthly before these meetings.
And so number 8 said it was going to commence in June of this year. Do you know if that's been done around the access of the Solon River in Dove Creek?
And Doug DeMarzo he's actually away, so we've got a few different actors in place for this meeting and this week. And I'm not sure if Jennifer Zibinen has an update on that from Doug at this stage. Probably not, but certainly we can make sure these are current
for next meeting.
Absolutely.
That would be great. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Director. I myself put forward that whole issue around losing access to our rivers, and as the summer progresses, it's going to become a major issue, because in the case of the Solon River, when MOTI gave away the original Reese Bridge, they also gave all that land to the adjacent farmer, in spite of the fact that we had about 4 years worth of dialogue to receive it for the regional district as a greenway. At any rate, that being said, no further questions on the management report. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. And then we have Advisory Planning Commission minutes. What be the will of the committee? Do you want to receive them all at once or individually? Move to receive all at once? Second. You're okay with that? Good. Okay. Any discussion on receipt? Call a question. All in favor? That carries. Electoral Area A Development Various Permit 4A19, 9 Little Bear Way. A report for receipt. Move second on receipt and over to acting CAO for introductions to staff.
Mr. Chair, Ton True, our Manager of Planning Services, will introduce the next couple of items. So over to Ton.
Okay, Ton's over there. Over to Ton. Welcome, Ton.
Good morning to the chair and to the committee. First of all, I'd like to ask the applicants to attend the table with me at the front. That'll be Jennifer and Dean Bell.
Howdy, folks. I only ask that you pull your microphones closer because some of us apparently are hard of hearing.
So, James, before we start off, could you turn to Appendix A, page 2? Oh, Antoinette. Appendix 2, Appendix A, page 2. Yep, that's perfect. So this application is for a variance for rear and side yard setback. The applicant's objective is to locate a 163 square meter accessory building for the purpose of storing an RV, other vehicles, and additional flex space room in the back. The preferred location of this is in the southwest corner of the existing driveway, as you can see. Their proposed shop in the corner there. Given the size of the lot and the siting of the house in the middle of the lot, the owners are proposing to vary the rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 1.7, to vary the side yard setback from 3.5 meters to 1.7, plus accompanying variance to the eve projection to the 1.1 meter to the property line. Moving the building further off the property line would result in a loss of average natural grade advantage necessary for a height variance. So if their applicant was to move their proposed building further out, this would trigger a height variance on top of their maybe their setback variance. This application went to the APC, and the APC recommend in support of this proposal. Notification letters were sent out to adjacent neighbors, and as of today, staff have not received any letters. Staff recommends the application be refused as its size is necessitating construction within the setback areas. It's uncharacteristic of the neighborhood development and the restriction it would create in maintaining the building. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do the applicants have anything they wish to say on the matter?
Yeah. I'm a little confused by the statement that he made about it being uncharacteristic to the neighborhood, because behind us is a 4,800 square foot shop, and the other corner is that was built 4 years ago. All our green space was ripped down behind us, and a 4,800 square foot shop was put directly behind us. The lights light up our living room and bedroom. Across the road from us is a shop that houses a semi. The house on the other side has a shop. The house beside us has a shop. The house kitty cornered behind us has a shop. So I'm a little confused by that statement. Our neighbor is actually beside us is here. And where you look at the shop, behind it, kitty corner, and beside it are all shops. There's no houses. And by pushing it back, it's actually out of the viewpoint of our neighbor.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And questions from the directors? Director Arbor.
Yes, thank you. And I attended the EPC meeting where this was discussed. Yeah, and I guess there was also a couple of emails over the weekend, and thanks staff for responding to that. I think the fellow directors got that as well. Okay. Which some of those points were similar as yours. It looks like if you move to page 6 of the report, I was highlighting that exact point that it seems to be characteristic of the neighborhood to have such buildings close to lot lines. It was later clarified by staff that all these other lots, actually, a lot of them were compliant. There was a couple of exceptions, but they were a lot of them were dealing mostly with side lot setbacks, and so they were fine actually in terms of. But I think there was one maybe or two, maybe staff can clarify that we're not. But overall, I think you're right that it seems to be. It's pretty tiny lots. It looks like you're trying to maximize the land. There was a concern raised, I think, around, with the building behind you being so close and yours being so close, it doesn't leave a lot of room for a lot between those two buildings at a 1 meter setback. So that's probably where I would have a concern. And maybe it'd be a question back to staff whether, from a fire safety perspective or things like that, whether having buildings that close to each other could be problematic. I know the APC had raised the question of around vegetation and things like that, the viability of having vegetation there. But, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I got you.
cut off. I don't know if it makes a difference, but you probably know this, but those trees that they were concerned about are actually quite a bit higher
Yeah.
than our property.
Okay.
And they're actually quite a bit further back.
Gotcha. No, that's good. So, yeah, so maybe I'll leave the mic to Director Amir. She seems to have a couple of questions, but I'm still pondering this. There was a positive recommendation from the APC. It sounds like we haven't had neighbor complaints, or there might even be some support. You are really pushing, though, going on both sides at the back and the side lot around 1 meter.
And we're willing to work with that and make it work so that it's good for everybody. But we just don't want the shop landing on our covered patio, because that would be another huge project to take that down.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Director Mayor.
Actually, my question was very much in line with what Director Arbour was just saying. The question about having another building clustered. I mean, you've got the very large building at, I guess, 3949, and then the smaller buildings on number 11. I'm on page 6 of the map. So having so many buildings clustered so close together, I was thinking maybe drainage issues too, with all these roof lines so close to each other. Is that so? Question of to staff is what are some of the issues of having buildings so clustered so close together?
To the chair, to Director Hamir. So unless this is on a development permit, through a development permit, we can ask for a drainage study. This proposal doesn't trigger any development permits that would trigger a drainage. Regards to fire separation, that's building code issue. So if this proposal does move forward in this location, the building inspectors will ensure that there is adequate fire separation between the buildings.
There you go. Thank you. And further?
So not having, I don't see much vegetative buffer between any of the buildings. Is that an issue? I mean, other than just aesthetic, having that kind of, vegetation in between, a meter different, like it's the meter access between buildings. Does that provide enough between your building and the neighbors? Like what's...
Through the chair to Director Hamir, I believe that vegetation that we're discussing is the neighbor's vegetation and not the applicant's. Therefore, when staff reviews variance application, we try to ensure that that the owners doesn't depend on the neighbor's vegetation, because they can remove the vegetation anytime they want. So it's really up to the applicant to provide that screening and the buffer. If this proposal does move forward with their request, staff is recommending that we put some type of fencing along there to ensure that there is no trespassing with trying to maintain their building with a ladder. So.
Okay. And Director Arbour.
Yeah, so thanks for raising the topic around drainage, even though it's not applied, but I think that's a consideration as well. No, overall, I think, there was a good, I don't see significant substantive reason to deny it, in my opinion. I am worried. The only one probably being, this is site-specific. You don't want people to break that everywhere, but with the big building behind them and the conditions where they can actually locate a shop like that, considering where your home is and things like that, and the fact that there are so many shops in the neighborhood, I would actually tend to support the application. And again, sitting in the APC meeting where there was a fulsome discussion for a long time and a lot of those topics were explored, I feel that the neighboring community seems to be in support as well, and their peers. So, yeah, I'll probably vote in favor.
Thank you very much. So we're going to vote on receipt now, so I'd like to excuse the applicants from the table.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Is there an opportunity for neighbors to?
Yeah. You should have to wait until they. Okay.
I don't call for the. So on receipt, call a question, all in favor? That's carried. And before we move the recommendations, is there anyone wishing to speak to this matter in the gallery? please come forward and have a seat. And state your name and address, please.
My name is Catherine Hagan. I live at number 11. I'm a new member of the community. I've been in my house since November of 2018. And I was a little slow to be aware of this. Perhaps I received the letter of July 4th on a work week when I did not have a chance to answer in writing. So, but I am the concerned neighbor. My property, if the map is shown, is the one adjacent to the side of the proposed structure. So at the bottom of the site map, where the red circle is, I'm in number 11, immediately on the south border. So my concern is this is a very large structure, which is, I feel like my property rights are protected by bylaws, and this is a very large structure coming immediately adjacent to my property. All of the other structures obey the easement requests, and I believe that this structure is very large, and one of my significant concerns is that there's a height difference between the entire back corner of my lot and number 11. So that if the excavation is allowed to come within 1.1 meters of the property line, I believe it threatens my fence and also could undermine my garage, which is, it's within the setback required, but it's close enough that I believe it could be materially affected by the excavation and by putting the structure that close to the property line. I request that the easements are protected as they exist in the bylaws. I do not support the variance for this.
Thank you very much. So we need a motion to receive that information. All in favor? Thank you. And now we're on the recommendation. We can either move it as it's written, change the wording from deny to approve, or refer it back to staff for more discussion with the applicant.
Director, Mr. Chair, could I just give a quick comment before Director Arbour provides his
Certainly.
comments? If that's all right, Director Arbour.
Yep.
In the past, when we have these types of situation, the committee has deferred this back to staff to work with the applicant to see if we can figure out a solution where we can speak with the neighbor and maybe push the house back or the accessory building back, and then we can report back to the committee next month. But that's just an option for you guys just to have.
Yeah, thanks for that, and I think that's good advice. I appreciate that you took the time today to come. I realize those notices sometimes happen pretty quick, and so that was definitely one of my elements for support of the application is the lack of neighbor concerns. I'm hoping that perhaps those concerns could try to be addressed by staff. So on that basis, I would move to defer and leave it with staff to see if there's a solution that can be found.
Okay, on deferral. All in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Now, from electoral area A to beautiful electoral area C, development variance permit application DV 4C19, a commercial and industrial development permit application DC 7C19 2330 Macaulay Road. Moved and second on receipt. And back over to Ton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to come to the table are the applicant's agent, Lindsay Clement and Philippa Atwood.
Welcome, you two.
Thank you.
Antoinette, can you turn to page 7 of the staff report, please? So staff has been working on this property for the last couple of years in regards to a rezoning application and a subdivision application to develop a zone that allows for a commercial industrial use on the site. The applicant objective is to construct 3 commercial/light industrial buildings for office space, mini storage, and a workshop, plus a bunch of C-cans in the back. This proposal does trigger 2 types of application, one a variance application and one a development permit application. So first of all, I'm just going to approach the variance application. There's 2 parts to the variance application. One is for a retaining wall. The proposed site design would terrace the property into 3 sections with the use of retaining walls. The zone bylaw requires retaining walls over 2 meters in height to adhere to the zoning setback regulations. To allow for the use of the lot, the owners are request a variance to allow the retaining wall, which would be up to 4.5 meters in height in the rear and the northern side setback area, plus a fence that would be installed on top of that retaining wall, mainly for protection of people from falling off the wall there. Staff supports the request limited to the retaining wall up to 4.5 meters plus their 1.8 meter fence. Notification letters were sent out about this retaining wall, and as of today, there's no correspondence from that. The other variance application is for the fascia sign. So the zone bylaw restricts that for every building, you can only have 1 fascia sign per building, maximum of 6 meters. Their applicant is requesting 2 signs, up to 7.2 meters square, and 1 rear sign up to 28 meters square. Antoinette, can you turn to the back I think there is a page that would show, oh, right there. So you can see there the mini storage large 28 square meter fascia sign and the 2 fascia sign on the office building. I believe the 2 elevation pictures in the bottom there. This proposal went to the APC for discussion, and the APC recommended that they increase they would be permitted to increase their fascia sign up to 8 square meters. The applicant is asking 7.2 square meters, so staff supports that. Staff concurs with the APC in refusing the larger 28 square meter sign that you see that says Saratoga Storage. Mm-hmm. So the second part of this application is the development permit for commercial industrial for form and character. As you see on the slide, the OCP contains guidelines that establish objectives for the form and character of the commercial industrial DP. The development permit area is intended to minimize potential conflicts with residential properties, ensure development is attractive and coordinated with respect to form and character of the neighborhood, and that their application has adequate buffer and screening. The applicant has hired a team of professionals that try to make this proposal work to meet our guidelines. The architectural design was created by Philippa Edward of Architecture, landscaping plan by Bloom Landscaping Architect, and the drainage plan was created by McElhaney Consulting. I won't get into too much details on the proposal. I will let their professionals kind of walk you through their proposal. But as staff's opinion, this proposal meets their development and commercial development permit guidelines, and staff recommends that this permit is issued. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Does the applicant wish to say anything further? Gotcha.
Thank you. I'll provide just maybe a little bit of background. This is a challenging site due to the natural grade that slopes away from Macaulay Road. And originally, we had one building. And because of the cost of excavation and the sloping, our clients decided to turn it into 3 buildings, which I think is a benefit for the form and character, because now we have 3 smaller buildings spread across the site instead of the one larger that was originally planned. And that was a budget consideration, but I think aesthetically it's a consideration also. And of course, they're designed. They're very simple, rectangular buildings with a gable roof, a peaked roof. They're designed to coordinate with each other. Same materials throughout. And when we have put the one feature, we wanted the building facing Macaulay Road, which is the most visible, to have a bit more character. So there's a nice timber frame, because it's a small building, timber frame entry and canopy just outside that, addressing the road, and of course the landscape. So,
Thank you very much. And questions from Director Hamir.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair. So a question about the different uses on the property. You are going to have mini storage and office and a workshop. So my understanding of mini storage is people kind of come 24/7. Is that going to now impact the other buildings, like having people there at all hours? Is there a different access or is there restricted access to the other buildings? Like, how will you?
there will be a gate. There will be a gate to the site. Yeah. So the access will be restricted based on the owners.
Okay.
How they manage the business. Yeah.
Okay. So how would the gate to the site, if you were visiting the non-storage areas, you would also have to key in to have access to the workshop or the other?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Seeing no further questions, we're going to take a vote on receipt, so I'd like to excuse you both from the table, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
So on receipt, all those in favor? Carried. And we have a couple of recommendations.
Move the first recommendation.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded on the first. Any further discussion? Seeing none. On that, call the question. All in favor? That carries. And number two?
Move the second recommendation that the board approves the development permit. Property described as Lot D, Block 29. I'm reading it because I just remember.
Oh, because we're on the slow cam now.
For the development of 3 new light industrial commercial buildings with a work storage yard.
Well, acting CEO has just informed me that I was remiss in not asking if there's any other comments from the gallery. Seeing none? Have we been seconded on the?
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? On recommendation 2, all in favor? That carries. Thank you very much. Electoral Area A, Kensington Comprehensive Development Permit, DP 5A19, Island Highway.
Second.
Moved and seconded. And over to Ton.
Great. For this file, I'm going to pass it to Brianne Labute. She is a planner for the regional district, and she will be presenting this to the committee.
Thank you. Welcome, Brianne.
Thank you. So through the chair to the Electoral Area Services Committee, the application you have before you today is the Kensington Comprehensive Development Permit. I'd like to invite the architect, Bo Helliwell, to join me at the table from Blue Sky Architecture. And also, I believe Chantel Richard and Adam Cooper are here. If you'd like to join me at the table as well. They are representing McElhaney, who prepared the drainage plan for this development permit. So Antoinette, if you could go to page 11, if you don't mind. That will show some of the general drawings.
Welcome, Jensen lady. Thanks for coming. I'm sorry, Brianne.
That's okay. Inside joke, I assume. So the development permit is for the construction of 2 buildings, which are connected by a trellised walkway to be used as a real estate center, offices, and a cafe deli, or that could end up being another kind of food service or retail use. That's not set in stone yet. The proposal includes a parking area, landscaping, drainage infrastructure, and other related site works. So with development permits, the board does have limited discretion compared to other planning approvals, such as a variance. And provided that the proposal meets the guidelines, then the development permit must be issued. So the discretion lies more in whether or not it meets the guidelines. And lucky for everyone, there's 88 guidelines in the Kensington development permit area. So there's quite a few to go through. And I definitely won't be belaboring you through all of those guidelines. So Antoinette, if you could go to page 13. So on page 13, it will show the proposed lot. So at this time, the property is actually a 7-hectare lot, but there are intentions to apply to the Ministry of Transportation to create a 0.3-hectare lot. So that subdivision in itself will, yeah, you're on the right one, will require a new Kensington development permit because lots of the guidelines are actually in relation to subdivision activities as well. So at this time, we don't really know if there's any large variation in what that lot configuration ends up looking like. It could mean that we're back at this table again with an amendment to the development permit. So you can see on the figure there that the subject site is outlined in blue. So Antoine, if you could go to page 22. So to meet the guidelines, the design needs to reflect on the rich heritage values of Union Bay and also coastal natural amenities of Vancouver Island. There's a number of submission documents to detail the general form and character for this development. And one of the main pieces is that the design of the building itself is intended to reflect on the historical Union Bay Pier with the large angled wood column supporting that large overhang. And then in addition, there will be a mural, either of the historical pier or another image related to the history of Union Bay that will be displayed on the business or surround the building face. The design also represents coastal natural amenities through the use of glass, wood, concrete, cedar, metal, and then some of the color choices, kind of the blue and the green accents. So lastly, Antoine, if you go to page 39, which is Schedule E, if that helps. So the proposal demonstrates adequate parking and opportunity for future connectivity, and that's pedestrian, cycling, and vehicular, to roads, sidewalks, and future trails, which would be determined more at the time of subdivision. The main floor of the buildings, walkways, and parking area will be barrier-free for people with disabilities. The proposed signage, there's freestanding signs, fascia signs, hanging signs, and dark sky compliant lighting are all consistent with the guidelines. The guidelines are very prescriptive on these particular matters. One guideline I wanted to highlight is that there is a guideline there that encourages pedestrian-oriented continuous street fronting development with buildings that line the street with minimal front yard setbacks or with setbacks that encourage outdoor use. Now, staff interpret this to be relevant to internal roadways rather than the island highway because the zoning bylaw prescribes a pretty large setback for the island highway, and the Ministry of Transportation is generally quite picky about new accesses that are going off of that highway. So that's the reason you'll see a landscaped berm in between the highway and the buildings opposed to kind of street fronting development. And then on the internal roads that are proposed, the building's also not right up to the lot line, and that's in order to have that sidewalk circulation area, which encourages outdoor use, which ultimately meets the guidelines as well. Sometimes, every once in a while with development permits, we have competing guidelines, so we have to be able to flesh out which one might take precedence depending on the site-specific context. So the landscape plan was prepared by Perry and Associates, and it meets the guidelines by detailing landscaping, which includes drought-resistant and native species wherever possible. And the landscaping is along the road frontage, around the buildings, and throughout the parking area to break that up a little. Something to note is that the landscaping plan is in relation to this proposed lot rather than the whole lot. And staff believe this is appropriate because then in the future there's going to be new development permits every time there's a new commercial building, and we can really make sure the scale of the land or the landscaping is appropriate for the scale and type of the development at that time, rather than prescribing something on the whole lot right now and then finding out there's going to be a much taller building and the landscaping may or may not be appropriate. There'll be an irrigation system that will be installed, which will be supplemented by rainwater capture, and the security deposit was collected will be collected, for 125% of the estimated works to ensure those are completed. To address rainwater, both green and gray infrastructure are proposed, and that would include some rain gardens, landscape ponds, an underground cistern, which would be collecting water that can be reused for irrigation, and then also some underground infiltration galleries. So it was important at this stage, because there were some unknowns with the rest of the development, that this was relatively self-sufficient, and then it would have the potential to connect later on into a larger stormwater system, whatever that may look like. So the rainwater management plans do meet all of the development permit guidelines. There are guidelines that pertain to energy conservation, water conservation, and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So the buildings are proposing to have solar panels are designed to be net zero, which is using only as much or less energy than it produces. And then water is being conserved through that rainwater capture in that cistern to be reused in irrigation, and also xeriscaping, so just using native species that naturally require a little bit less water once they're established. There's been thought put into the orientation, species, and size of trees to make sure they're not interfering with sunlight going to the solar panels, and then also the choice of deciduous species in certain circumstances to make sure there's a maximum winter sunlight, and then shade during the summer months. So a couple more general notes about this site. The site does have contamination issues due to its previous industrial use. Most of the coal hills has now been purchased by the province, but there was coal processing that occurred in the area where the building site is. The Ministry of Environment has issued a release letter to allow just this specific development permit to move forward. So basically, every time we get a new development permit, we're checking in with the ministry again to see if we're able to move forward on those or not. The proponent will continue to work with the province on a remediation plan for the overall site. This development overall is governed by a master development agreement, which was approved by the board in 2010, but then reopened in 2017 through an amendment. And it details community amenities the developer will provide, which include road, kind of water, sewer servicing. The development permit application actually doesn't trigger any of these commitments in the MDA. However, there's some pretty substantial triggers at time of building permit for this Discovery Center building. And the applicant and the owner are well aware of those. And they're also aware that the development permit, if issued, is good for 2 years. And so if these commitments take longer than that, then it'd be a matter of going through this process again. The APCA reviewed the proposal at their June 11th meeting and supported the proposal. Public notification and consultation are not required for development permits, and the reason for that is because that process occurs at time of them being established in the official community plan. But we are well aware that there's a lot of public interest around this project, so we have been maintaining a project page on the website just to keep the public up to date. And certainly, although not a huge turnout today, we have been fielding some calls about the development and just questions about what we've posted. The last thing I wanted to add is the plans have gone through a number of revisions since they were first submitted. So there's been an iterative process back and forth between staff to make sure that it does meet these development permit guidelines. And as such, staff conclude that the guidelines have been adequately addressed, and therefore the issuance of the development permit is supportable. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Do you want to start again? Thank you very much for that very fulsome and comprehensive report. Anything that our learned representatives at the table want to add to that?
I think it's been covered. Thank you. And if there are any questions from anybody here, happy to answer them or try to.
That's precisely what we do here. And we have a question already from Director Hamir.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. The design is quite lovely. I really appreciate all the green energy and water capture that you're doing on site. A couple of questions. I didn't hear about septic. Is that something that is just generally thought, like there's a septic system already or will be in place and independent running? And is that something that's being considered?
So that's not something that the guidelines contemplate, because usually that would be a requirement that appears at the building permit stage. So certainly that's something that will need to be addressed, whether it's on a septic in the interim, and of course the approval for that is Island Health, or whether it will feed into the larger sewerage system.
And a septic and a cistern. I'm assuming the water capture is underground, or do you have a freestanding? Because would those two systems have to be sort of? I've never I haven't seen an underground cistern. So how do the two kind of coincide?
I'll just add one more comment, if
Sure.
I may, and that's that one thing we did make the applicant aware of is to put their mind to that, to think, because if the septic ends up being in a location that starts to adjust these site plans that we've seen here, and the development permit is issued contingent on adherence to those, then we're going to be back at the table for an amendment. So that is something that we've made them aware of. The cistern itself is, you can see between the two buildings under the trellis walkway there, that's the landscape garden, then the cistern's just in between that area as well.
Right. My second question, and I don't know if the agents here can answer. Once the building is done as a sales site, do we know what the end use of the building will be? Have the applicants indicated what it will turn into?
It'll continue as a commercial use. The building on the right will it's being designed so it's a food services building. The one on the left is half the downstairs volume is just a large open space which will be used as a call it a sales pavilion, explaining the overall development and then specific parts of it as they come on stream. On the far left, it's 2 stories high at that point, and it's configured as conventional offices. And so we expect that the building will have a office, maybe some sales.
Okay.
But this is a long-term project, and it'll be used as the sales building for quite a long period of time.
The design is quite modern, and I'm just wondering, is that going to be reflective of the types of homes that will be in the development area? Is it indicative of what the designs will be?
We have nothing so far to do with
Okay.
that. We've just been hired for this one
Just for the
building.
sales, yeah.
And so I actually don't know the intentions there.
Okay. And my last question, which was triggered just by a comment from staff, the contaminated site, with the coal being present, does that require fill to be brought in to cap the coal so that development can happen? Or generally what happens with a site like that if you're developing? And I'm assuming development for residential use, is that what the plan is?
So through the chair to Director Hamir, so at this point we haven't been privy to what the remediation plan will actually look like. Certainly that capping is one approach that could be used, and to understanding there are different standards depending on whether it's commercial development or residential development. But the ministry hasn't kept us apprised at this point of what that plan is.
Thanks.
There will be fill brought in because there's concerns with the height above sea level. And so the regional district will set, it'll like to be the Minister of Environment will set a table for the lowest floor structure. And from what we're in preliminary discussions, the site where the building is will be raised by fill. No, I don't,
Sorry.
actually.
Okay. Director Arbor?
There's a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
There was the flood construction level report included in the DP application, I believe? Oh, it wasn't?
So
Okay.
we didn't include, there was a flood construction report because that time of building permit, certainly we'll be looking at flood construction levels. So to not add to a 90-page report, we decided to keep that out. But at this stage, if I recall correctly, it's 4-point-something meters
Yeah,
will be
4.6.
required. So there's been an analysis in accordance with the provincial floodplain guidelines that were amended last year of
Yeah.
what that's going to look like. So certainly there will be structural fill or however they choose to raise the property up. which will have to work in tandem with whatever's recommended through the remediation process for the contaminated soils.
Director Arbor, you have any questions or comments?
Well, I'd just like to highlight that this is the very first, basically, application for an actual building on the site after a long process dating back almost 30 years. So it's actually could be a very exciting moment. I agree that it's nice to see some of the negotiations that have been done in the past around the guidelines and all that translate into the kind of building that I think this board wants to see and the kind of design principles embedded in that. So that's really great that the developer and the regional district seem to be on the same page around that. I think the servicing questions will continue to circulate in the community around especially the sewage part, but again, as was highlighted by staff, that's a matter for that's before the province currently. And then obviously the regional district through our own channels in regards to possibilities that we continue to investigate in Area A. We also have a parallel channel around that. And it's also an option that perhaps this particular building could have its own little septic, depending on how it goes. So I'd like to highlight those discussions were held. That was a really nice meeting with the APC in Area A. I think that we spent a long time discussing it, and I want to thank Boeli Well for being there that day. It was really a good session where a lot of those questions were also explored, and a lot of the some of the question marks that are left are still there. But we, it's breaking ground potentially for 3,000 more to come our way. So I would agree with Mr. Halliwell's assessment that that building, if you look at the progress on Crown Isle over 25 years, they're at about half of what their ambition is. So I can expect that that building may be a sales building for the next 50 years or so, depending how things go. But anyways, I just want to underline that this is a first, and I want to thank staff for the thorough job and for the applicants, and I'll be in favor of issuing the permit.
Thank you very much. Well, I must admit, I'm very disappointed. I thought that building would be a great Cadillac GM dealership, but sorry, just kidding. Electric Cadillacs, of course. As being one of the dinosaurs around here that actually remembers the master development permit original discussions continuing in that room until midnight and far beyond, you remember that. It's been a long slog to get to where we're at right now, and certainly having grown up in the Comox Valley, and I think Union Bay has weathered it out pretty much without too much development, and to see the possibility of leapfrogging in technologies into the future. I mean, as far as a coast-side community goes, I can see Union Bay, it really becoming a beautiful kind of a community, much like along the lines, say, of Sydney in the Lower Island, where they have all the development of the foreshore and everything. So hopefully this is just the first step in attaining that. So certainly I'll be supporting this, and I guess we have any other questions on receipt. So I will excuse the applicants from the table, and thank you all for coming. And we'll call the question on that. All in favor? Carried, and we have recommendation. Do I have to? No, it's not a, all the development permit stuff's been done. Okay, so you,
I'll move that the board approve the development permit EP 5A 19 at 34083 Yukon Inc. on the property described as Lot 3, District Lot 154, Nanaimo District, Section 32, Township 1, and District Lot 28, Nelson District Plan, EPP 15507, PID number 028-731-531, Lot 3, Plan, EPP 15507, Island Highway, for the construction of 2 buildings connected by a trellised walkway, parking area, drainage, infrastructure, landscaping, and related site works. And further, that the corporate legislative officer be authorized to execute the permit.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? That carries. We're going to have to make sure that in future that our staff keep their recommendations to a bare minimum, because we have to repeat all this now that we're being streamed on, hi Mom, on camera here, so that the stay-at-home public can actually keep up on what we're doing. I'm going to ask just for a very brief recess.
Sure.
And just to refresh and be right back. Oh. Well, you got your fly fishing rod in there, do you?
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, what I do, not too bad. What are you opening? You open a couple short hikes in. So just, yeah, I see at the bottom, go, just hold your mouth.
Daughter got all her
See, it says 1 of 79.
courses signed up
Brianne
for
did a
the
good thing.
next
She said go to page 11.
term.
So if you go move your mouse back to
No,
the
she's
bottom,
actually transferred university.
click
She's
on the
gonna
one.
go to the University of Western in
and
London,
type in 11.
where I grew up, which is pretty
Enter.
cool. So, you know, my
Takes
brother
you
and
page
sister
11
and
of the
sister-in-law
PDF.
in there, and my mom are there.
So Brianne was really good by saying exactly
That's
what
nice. So, yeah, we're closer to have some family. No, it's too far.
And
Where
yeah.
they live is a bit too far away from
I find that to be
from the
much easier than
campus kind of thing, but you know, she'll
scrolling
be able to
down.
pop over for, you know, a Sunday dinner kind of thing, and get their,
And
get
for
their
zooming in and
dog
out, I
fixed
do the
by
same
visiting
thing
with
with
the
the
puppy
bottom
and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's just kind of
stuff,
nice
yeah.
that they'll be there and that she'll get to know my hometown a bit better, kind of thing. So, yeah, no, she,
No?
So what's her?
No.
I want to move it that way.
and the reason she transferred is,
Yeah. No, when you're
performance based.
running the projector, you kind of
Then,
figure out what those
Carlton
options are.
turned out to be, so.
I always I thought Brianne was
One
really
of
good. How
the-
she said go to page 11.
The main flute professor
She
there
knows
is
it's
pretty, like,
page 11 of the PDF.
check him out
Not
online and say,
necessarily
holy cow.
the
Yeah, he still tours periodically and does guest solos and symphonies around the world. Like it's, you know, so, yeah, so that was the reason to kind of make the shift. But so now she's kind of, she's gone into second year, but she has a couple first year courses she's got to take with us to catch up on. Just to kind of thing, so she had a good conference call with someone there to help her out with how to make it all work. So she's feeling better, but right, it was always good. You know, okay, well, what do I need to do? What do I, you know, so she's happy that that's kind of sorted out.
Call this meeting back to order, and we're on number 5, Comprehensive Rural Zone Bylaw Review. How hard can it be? And back over to Ton. Moved and seconded on receipt, and over to our planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm here to present and summarize the First Nation and external agency comments that we received, but also present our draft bylaw to this committee, asking for first and second reading and to recommend a public hearing date be set. This committee may recall on June 25th, the board adopted a resolution to endorse agency referral list and commence First Nations and external agency referral process. Since that time, the bylaw has had some minor changes, and I'm just going to verbally tell you what those are. There's 5 that I would like to just to present to this group here. The draft bylaw, as of today, will now allow third-party signs or wayfinding signs. Staff received a lot of comments from the public about prohibiting third-party signs. So staff view was that we will look at looking at the sign regulations at a later date, hopefully within a year or two, just to address this third-party sign issue. But as of today, third-party signs are permitted. We're going to permit mini storage in Lot B within the Saratoga Commercial Industrial Zone. Other changes are we have removed the watercourse regulations out of the bylaw. The purpose of the watercourse regulations back then was to capture our floodplain bylaw regulations for hazardous conditions. Staff is in the process of starting to commence that review of the floodplain bylaw. Once we get more of analysis on it, we will use that information and put that back into the zoning bylaw. Right now, it's redundant. It is captured in the floodplain bylaw. The other change is just one. Oh, the one change is for the bed and breakfast on ALR land. We were informed by Ministry of Ag that our regulations was too permissive. Change them from 5, so we're going to change it to 4 bedrooms instead of 5, just to be consistent with their provincial regulations. And the last one, Antoinette, can you turn to the bylaw itself, the draft bylaw on page 28, section 308. On Thursday, as you may recall, staff posted their draft zoning bylaw on Thursday night. On Friday morning, I found a small little error in that zoning bylaw that I want just to inform this committee. So it's section 308, page 28. Just a bit more there, Antoinette, 308. It's under their mobile vendors. 308. Right there, perfect. Oh, just go back a bit. So the bylaw that was posted back on Thursday night under 308 mobile vendor, it used to state mobile food vendor. Mobile food vending shall be permitted use in all zones. We just removed the food just to be consistent with the bylaw. So that's the only change. The reason why we remove the food is we want to make sure that we capture all types of vendors, not just food. People who sells vacuums to gadgets and so forth. So the bylaw is really restricted on just the food. So we just got rid of the word food out of the mobile food vendors and made it mobile vendors. So that's the thing that I just want to address to this committee and just to move forward with this bylaw that you have in front of you. So moving forward, staff received a bunch of comments from First Nations and external agency referral as noted in Appendix C. The KFN, WayYK Nation, and WeYCome First Nation had no further comments to the draft bylaw. The Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure had a chance to review the draft bylaw and had no objections to it. Staff will be presenting a final version of the copy before final adoption, so they will have another approval for this. The Village and Cumberland supported their proposed bylaw, but had one following conditions to expand the TC2 polygon zone further into the Comox Lake to basically where the log booms are to allow people to swim. Staff has spoken to the village staff about allowing this to happen through an application process and getting proper approval from the province to expand this into the water. UBID commented their proposed draft bylaw won't affect any of their two properties, so they supported the application, supported the draft bylaw. And the Ministry of Agriculture provided some comments on Wednesday night, and they gave us a bunch of information. So staff luckily had a chance to had a conference call with them on Thursday, had a bunch of discussions with the Ministry of Ag, and did some changes to the bylaw to adapt to them. And in staff's view that their comments and the changes is consistent with the Ministry of Ag, but any future changes, as staff, my plan is with this committee's support is we would do some housekeeping every 2 years instead of every 14 years to capture these new regulations and changes. One last comment is, as noted in the staff bylaw, that staff will still receive comments from external agency up to the termination of the public hearing. So since that time, since the external agency referral, and since today, staff has not received any more comments regards to the draft bylaw. We had some meetings with certain stakeholders and stuff, and these changes has been captured through the draft. On that note, staff recommends the first and second reading to the bylaw 500 and set a public hearing date. Staff proposed August 28th, 2019 date for the public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And questions from directors. Director Hamir.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Chair. So a few questions. Regarding the comments from Ministry of Agriculture, I noticed like the terminology around light industrial or home industrial, has that been adjusted?
Yeah. To the chair, to Director Hamir, that's the domestic industrial. We informed that domestic industrial is not permitted on air land.
Okay.
They had concern that it was too permissive over the home occupation.
Right.
So that was just a clarification
Okay,
to them.
right. And then the big question, on cannabis.
Yes.
So the ministry's reading of the bylaw was that we were not going to be allowing cannabis production unless it was in soil. I just want to clarify because I'm in favor of that, but just wanted to double check if that's what's.
Through the chair to Director Hamir, so Jody McLean, the rural planner, is planning to present something to the committee sometime in either August or September to proceed with an OCP and zoning amendment to the bylaw to capture the cannabis issue regards to production, retail, and everything else. So we informed the Ministry of Ag about what we want to do, and we're going to be working closely with them to capture these uses moving forward. So this review of the zone bylaw the intent was not to capture any of the cannabis part, and it's everything stays the same. But moving forward in the next few months, you will be receiving our proposal for the First Amendment to this bylaw.
Okay. Okay, if we want to do it that way, sure. And just one last question. I know one of the user groups contacted me about the use of the terminology in your definition of hostile and the use of the word permanent residence. I don't know if you recall that conversation with them. And if that had sort of been waylaid with them or if, yeah.
Through the chair to Director Hamir, was it Comox Valley Vacation Rental
Yes.
and Bed and Breakfast?
Yes.
Yep. So we as staff, myself, had numerous conversations with this group. We did remove those two words out of their out of the definition.
Okay.
And they were happy with it.
Okay.
They are aware that in November, I will be doing a review on this vacation rentals, and this is going to be another process that we will present to you guys.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Arbor.
I have no question. I think it's good to go for me.
Okay. In that case, I do, and I think you're aware of this. Regarding mobile food vendors, broadening that out just to vendors seems inappropriate to me. And the most inappropriate thing is, in this day and age of food trucks, that we limit it to 2 hours. I think that is kind of inconsistent with what municipalities are doing in other areas as well. I think if somebody's going to set up somewhere, that 2 hours is you know, it should, I think it would be a lot better to broaden it out to maybe 6 hours in a 24-hour period or something like that. So if you're going to set up in some place, I mean, you never know when people are going to be coming by, and it may be a little lunch rush and it may be a 4 o'clock rush or something. But, you know, even just an ice cream stand, 2 hours seems inconsistent with what probably would be, you know, comparable in other jurisdictions. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to extend that out.
To the chair, it's funny that you mentioned that. Just the last week or two, we received a complaint about food vendor for just the fact that they're there for at least 2 hours. The bylaw itself, that's the term mobile means that it needs to be moved site to site every 2 hours. If it's a commercial industrial zone, if retail is permitted, they can be there as long as they want. When it comes to residential properties, these mobile vendors are permitted on the property for no more than 2 hours, and then it has to be moved from site to site. This issue that we have is this mobile vendor is parking this apparatus there for 2 hours, closing it down and opening up again. The concern was the neighbor had concerns regards to the residential culture that is creating traffic and garbage and trespassing issue, and also parking. So that's
one complaint.
One complaint that we received regards to the mobile vending.
What about TC1, TC2 areas?
It's permitted. If the mobile vendors were going to a special event for that day, it's permitted through the special event.
Like in a community?
Yeah,
community hall
yeah,
situation.
exactly. Farmers market and stuff. But exactly. But when it comes to residential neighborhood, our concern is parking, nuisance issues with regards to odor and smell, and also the disruption of the residential character, having these sandwich board signs, having people being attracted to a residential street that, you know, ideally should be used for residential use.
So 308 says that mobile food vending shall be permitted in all zones subject to the following conditions.
Yeah.
But do I have to go to the TC1 to see, is it mentioned, does it refer back to?
So section 308.2, the vending of all goods by a mobile vendor shall be carried out for more than 2 hours per 24 hours period on any line which does not permit retail sales. So that says that any commercial, any tourist commercial zones that allows you to have retail sales are permitted to be there more than 24 hours. Not saying that we have one, but Home Depot, if the retail sales would be permitted there for a 24-hour period as a mobile vendor, yeah.
So just the CR1s and et cetera?
Residential zones.
Anything with an R in it?
Are properties in Royston, Yuen Bay, any residential zones that says R, RU, R1, and so forth. But all commercial industrial zones will permit this mobile vending use.
Thank you. I just think that, yeah, I just don't want to, somebody nowadays to put together a food truck is going to cost you 30 grand at least, right? So 2 hours makes no sense. A guy with an ice cream bicycle is a different story. He's moving all the time, so. Okay, so that brings us to receipt. All in favor? And are we going to do it?
Yep.
I'll let you do it, Dan. You've been awfully quiet.
Shorter one.
I know you're watching Netflix, but.
So move that the board give first and second reading of bylaw number 520, 2019, being the Rural Comox Valley Zoning Bylaw number 520, 2019. And finally, that pursuant to section 4641 of the Local Government Act, the board schedule a public hearing for bylaw number 520, being the Rural Comox Valley Zoning Bylaw number 520, 2019.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Okay, memorandum of understanding for the active transportation, Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure.
Move receipt.
And Mr. Chair, we have Mark Harrison here. He is our acting manager of parks, and we'll be introducing this this staff report this time.
Welcome, Mark.
Hi to the chair and to the directors. I'm here today to just present a memorandum of understanding, which we've been working on since late 2017 between the Ministry of Transportation and the regional districts on Vancouver Island and the Sunshine Coast, in terms of trying to outline and standardize general processes in regards to planning and implementation of active transportation within the Modi road dedication in unincorporated areas. So this is a non-binding agreement, and it is kind of a first step towards a planning document, which is being reviewed right now. It's a guidelines document that will be present kind of more specifics in terms of the permitting process and details and standards around active transportation infrastructure. And really it's, the province has, I guess it's been probably a month or so that they released their active transportation strategy and their design guidelines. And this complements that. This is more specific to our areas and our regional districts. So really the intent is to develop a cooperative set of principles to be used for active transportation infrastructure in the Modi road dedication. So staff do believe that this MOU is a positive step forward to promote collaboration between our public agencies, and also to promote more efficient and effective active transportation within the valley. And we do support the adoption of this MOU.
Thank you very much. And Director Muir.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair. Totally support the MOU. Just a couple of questions. I'm assuming it came from the province. Was this an initiative that came from them? Did we push for this as well? Do you know?
Through the chair to Director Amir, it was actually the regional districts on Vancouver Island that all got together, basically the parks managers, right, to figure out ways to make things more standardized and more consistent and efficient for trying to get active transportation, because what some people were doing, what Ministry of Transportation was allowing in some regional districts was different than in other regional districts. And so we're just trying to make a consistent playing field and make everything well understood between all public bodies.
Great. And then I note that we do have a strategic plan from 2011 around active transport. Is there anything more up to date from that? Like, do we have a list of priorities of bike trails or other active transport? I'm not on the transportation committee, so are you aware of a list that we have kind of going of where we want active transportation sort of sites?
Through the chair to Director Amir, at this stage, I don't think that we actually have a priorities program, but this MOU does outline that would be what we'd be moving forward towards on an annual basis.
Thank you.
I can just weigh in there on our Integrated Regional Transportation Select Committee, the IRTSC. That committee is looking at a single point of contact for transportation type initiatives. It has looked at some of the gaps that it feels exists in the Comox Valley relating to transportation, and active transportation is certainly one of those gaps where it sees some opportunity to provide some advice or direction on how to address some of the gaps. So it's still that committee is still working through some of those different opportunities and looking at a governance structure that could help with active transportation specifically. So stay tuned, I guess.
It's just a select committee at this point. They want to move beyond that. Director Arbor.
Yeah, well, I think to Dr. Amir, I think there's a paragraph in the staff report that lists the rural Comox Valley Parks and Greenway Strategic Plan 2011, identifies the number of active reserve priorities. So I didn't actually take the time to go and dig that one up, but it sounds like we do have some kind of baseline. And over the next couple of days, maybe this will be my first salvo, but over the last week, I've been thinking that it may be good to have a discussion for the Easc to hold our own strategic session this fall. I don't know if it's been done in the past, but there's a number of front where I see perhaps that if we got together as rural areas to try to prioritize or reprioritize some of the things that are unique to the rural areas, it may be worthy of consideration and help channel some of those things coming at us. Some of them coming today, some of them coming tomorrow. So I thought I'd take the opportunity while Mr. Dyson is away to suggest that. And
bring that up under new business.
Yeah, exactly. But overall, in terms, I was that was interesting to see the ENN. Actually, I don't call it the ENN; it's the Island Corridor being mentioned in there as well. And so there's a number of questions, and I can see that this in relation to MOTI. And when they came, I think I tried to open the conversations around some potential capital projects that perhaps could be prioritized in Area A. But I think something like that, working with staff over the coming year and having a clear framework with them would really be helpful. But beyond that specific one, I think having an Easc kind of strategic think tank in the fall looking for the next year, I would see as valuable, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Amir?
I'd like to second that because I note as coming up on the agenda, the Community Works funds, I think trying to prioritize and strategize around how those funds are used would be very helpful for, as a new director. Where should we be focusing rather than when certain I guess, opportunities arise, they can kind of come out of the blue versus being more strategic about it. So does that require a formal motion, do you think?
Well,
or?
I think we can maybe roll it into something at the end of the meeting.
Okay.
New business.
Or even at the finishing of this discussion, if you want.
Sure.
Let's wait for new business.
New business, okay. Well, actually, oddly enough, this came up at UBCM last week as well. And at the committee I was sitting at, it was obvious to the electoral area directors there that it was very municipal focused in some regards, or at least community focused, and didn't really address, some of the issues about in electoral areas as well. So in the comment back to the province, it was reiterated that there should be special consideration made for MOTI corridors in electoral areas to connect better. So and not so much a focus just on communities, which obviously community can be unincorporated, but just basically the long distances between mailboxes again that we experience. Okay, so on receipt, All in favor? And recommendation, read out quickly. We're going to have to abbreviate these recommendations.
Move the recommendation that
Sorry.
the draft memorandum of understanding attached to the staff report dated July 5th, 2019, between the Ministry of Transportation and the Comox Valley Regional District in regards to the general processes for planning and implementing active transportation infrastructure within provincial road dedication in unincorporated areas be approved. And further, that this memorandum of understanding be sent to the local municipalities and the Integrated Regional Transportation Select Committee for receipt. And further, that the final memorandum of understanding be signed by staff. And finally, that staff be directed to explore regional greenway planning in support of the MOU.
Second.
Very good. All in favor? That carries. Mount Washington Fire Service, building update for receipt.
Second.
Who's this character?
James Bass is our manager of fire services.
Fire Services.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, through the chair and through to the committee. What I'm providing today is a staff report that just provides a quick snapshot of an update with regards to the project. The next aspect of this service project is the construction and development of a fire services building. And what I've met with the steering group. We had a steering group meeting earlier, and the steering group has gone through and reviewed this staff report. The steering group reviewed it in 3 different aspects: the conceptual design of the building, the conceptual siting of the building, and the proposed or the preliminary cost estimates for the building. So in each one of those, in the conceptual design of the building, I can report that the steering group was generally pleased with the design, but they did request that the building be somewhat scaled a little bit larger to accommodate 2 full-size trucks. The design that we have presented was more for 1 full-size truck and 1 track machine. There were a number of other aspects that the steering group had provided comment with regards to the building. Those comments have been supplied to the project manager and engineer who is providing these drawings. Conceptual siting of the building on the property. Just to bring the directors up to speed, within the Mount Washington community and within the fire service area, we have a very small piece of property that was donated to us by the Mount Washington Alpine Resort in 2002, and so that's the piece of property that we're working with. One of the key pieces to this is the challenge has been presented, and we've realized the challenge by way of topography. And with the steep slopes, development permit, and the size of the property, the size of the building, which has now, as the steering group has requested, the building is a little bit larger. So staff is currently gathering more information with regards to how the building could be oriented on the site and what would be required for permits. That information we're still gathering, and I'll be able to provide a more fulsome report as the next update. Preliminary cost estimates. One of the key aspects to this, to the staff report and to the engineer's report, was the unknown site preparation costs. And yeah, and one of the key challenges to this is you can see where the fire truck is parked on top. That bank actually comes down, and about not very far down from that fire truck is our property line that runs this way, east-west. That's facing north, and so we have quite the slope challenge on this side, and the engineer will be providing some analysis of that and what our options are. Through the steering group, one of the key pieces that came forward with this was that the original design of the building, conceptual design of the building, was minimalist, to be as small as possible. And we were meeting some challenges to meet the cost of that. The steering group has been indicating, and particularly in this last meeting, that they would like to look at the possibility of increasing the amount that we can borrow, so that we can get this accomplished sooner rather than later. So with the steering group providing that advice and guidance to staff, we will be moving forward. I'm available for any questions that the directors may have.
If I may, Mr. Budge in front. Yeah, I was at the steering group meeting, and I was also at all the steering groups prior to the referendum. And at the time, it was concern over the maximum tax requisition. They wanted to keep it, below $1 on the 1,000 and everything. But of course, now that it's actually passed, and the reality is starting to show that we only have about 70 grand in reserve, and we're at 94 cents per thousand on our requisition. We have a ceiling of what, 110?
115.
115, that's
Yep.
right. Which is, I think the feeling around the table now is, let's get it done, for gosh sakes. We don't want to wait till 2024 to actually be able to afford to put something up. And of course, also on that was the steady increase in the cost of doing it as time goes on. So, things being as they are, what was our maximum borrowing now? I had that written down too.
415.
Yeah, 415. So, that's really inadequate. And also the concern about building the fire hall too small. It's one thing to build something a little too big, but usually grow into it. Whereas the other option would mean going to have lean-tos or outbuildings or something. I mean, it's Mount Washington. You can't go outside to take off your apparatus. So I think that the general, now that reality set in, the general consensus from the public up there is, let's not build it too small, let's build it right, and let's increase our borrowing and increase our tax requisitions. So my question to staff here would probably be, I know we're going to be looking at some kind of an alternate approval process for borrowing for the Merville. Would it not make sense to run the two concurrently if we go to the public?
Mr. Chair, we could certainly consider doing that. We'd have to see what the purpose of joining them together, whether there's any efficiency to doing that. These are two distinct communities, and there'd be two very different sets of parameters driving them. Of course, it's all about a fire hall, two fire halls, but we'd want to make sure that there's value in doing them at the same time, and it doesn't confuse matters or lead to other unintended consequences.
Confused matters, yeah, I forgot about that part.
We don't want to do that.
Okay, but yeah, I just thought there might be some synergy there because you're talking about two fire services, and the discussion could be made at the same time, so all your communication would be kind of rolled into one. And whether or not, the office would be open for voting or whatever, whether or not we're going to go to an APC, I'm not sure, but I do think I agree with James that there is definitely now an appetite to do it and do it right and get it done sooner than later. What was the increase running, like 2.3% a year or something?
Yeah, conservatively, we've calculated escalations at 3%.
Yeah.
So
it's hard to keep up with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's my two best worth. I'll turn it over to you, Daniel.
That's great, and I just want to concur that looking at the building footprint, even pushing the washrooms out further or something like that will give you ability to have two fire trucks. So a lot of what you said about the steering group seems to make sense. The cost, if I compare it to the Hornby Fire Hall, is much, much smaller. So there's, for me, on a comparative basis, it seems like Mount Washington is going to get not pay a lot for their fire hall. So the only thing I might add another $2,500 for your budget in the event that all the CVRD vehicles end up being electric, it might be good to have a level 2 charging station into the building.
Okay.
Because it's a long ways up.
They don't even have a gas station up there.
They don't even have a gas station. They could have a, so you know me, I mention it at every opportunity in every capital projects that we do. They're easier and more cost effective to put in when you're doing the build and later on. So no, otherwise that's great. I look forward to see this project unfold.
Me too. Any further? On receipt? All in favor?
Thank
That
you.
carries.
Thank you.
Asset management planning updates for receipt.
And Mr. Chair, Chris LaRose and Zoe Berkey are both here to provide us an update on asset management.
Welcome.
Thank you. Through the chair, so we are nearing some completion of significant asset management planning work for all of our local service areas for water. So for this committee, it would be Royston and the Greater Comox Valley Water Local Service Area. And we just want to provide an update on the next steps because it has been a while. So we're planning to present the reports and recommendations to any changes in rates in September. And then following that work, completing public consultation and kind of just informing them on any changes and why in October. And then hopefully having the rate recommendations and changes being approved in late October to inform the financial planning process. We're happy to answer any questions.
Proof will be in the pudding. Red rubber.
Just a quick one, since the focus of it tends to be the Royston service. How much detail is provided? Is the status of the value of the building we have at the Royston property included in that, in terms of any repairs that might be done to it? Will that include the status of the pipe works? What is the extent of detail we may expect in terms of the asset management?
Very detailed. So the inventory, which is kind of what's been taking so long because we want to make sure we get it right, details every single asset within Royston. So we've gone
Great.
through all the as-built, picked out valves, water mains, buildings, roofs, electrical, instrumentation. We've tried to capture almost everything.
Okay, and so should we brace ourselves and to be shocked, or is there any surprises you see on the line, or you'd rather reserve those comments for when you present the report?
Yeah, we have just received the drafts, and there is a bit of rejigging to do, so
Okay.
it'd be a little bit premature to share a number now.
Okay.
But I think it's safe to say that for Royston, there will very likely be a rate increase recommendation to be able to meet those long-term demands. Yeah.
Okay, thanks
Yeah.
for the heads up, and
Yeah.
we look forward to the report.
Thanks.
The day of reckoning is near upon us. Thank you very much. So receipt. All in favor? That carries. The moment we've all been waiting for. Watuutko Water System. A report July 11th regarding the potential takeover. I don't like the word takeover, of the Watuutko Water System located in the Comox Valley Regional District, Puntledge Black Creek Electoral Area C for receipt. And back to Chris.
Great. Thank you, through the chair. So Watuutko is a private managed water system in Area C that services 128 residential properties and a couple of commercial properties as well. It's entirely surrounded by the Black Creek Oyster Bay system, as is seen on the map that was attached to the report. And it draws water from the Oyster River through an infiltration gallery, quite similar to the infiltration gallery that the Black Creek Oyster Bay system has, except it relies entirely on that infiltration gallery. So several years ago, Island Health notified Watuutko that they needed to comply with the surface water treatment objectives. Up until that point, there had been some mixed messaging, it felt like, and that some of those smaller systems expected to almost get a pass from those requirements. So that is no longer the case. So they do have a tight timeline for meeting the surface water treatment objectives. I think their current commitment is to the end of by the end of 2020, and it does involve a significant investment for this system. So the Watuutko owners made a formal request to the CVRD several years ago that we consider converting the system to a regional service. And in response, we initiated a feasibility study. It was approved by the Black Creek Oyster Bay Service, but funded out of Area C feasibility funds. So the study took a little longer than expected. We had to run a pump test on that infiltration gallery several times to get some results that we were happy confident to carry forward. But the work has now identified 3 viable options. One is some form of business as usual, so some continuation of the private managed utility. The second one would be, well, second and third both involve some type of regional conversion. The first being as an independent CVRD service, so not joined with the Black Creek Oyster Bay. So in other words, the CVRD would take over the service and then build the required standalone treatment infrastructure. So then the third is a regional conversion to regional service and in some form part of the Black Creek Oyster Bay system. So the study work and the consultation with Watuco to date suggests that the option of joining with the Black Creek Oyster Bay system has the best long-term prospects or lowest cost to Watuco. However, the Black Creek Oyster Bay system has a number of other priorities right now, including trying to secure additional water capacity, and support for that scenario is uncertain through the Black Creek Oyster Bay Committee, I think it's fair to say at this point. So this report kind of marks a transition of this file from the Black Creek Oyster Bay Services Committee to the EASC, in acknowledgement that the Watuco system has a very tight timeline for compliance with the regulations, and that's in place regardless of BCOB support. So we've developed a high-level schedule for working with Watuco, for consulting with residents and committee approvals, which looks something like this. So the joint Watuco CVRD public meeting this summer to update residents on what's been going on and what to expect. Detailed CVRD analysis over the rest of the summer with input from Watuco and the consultants, and then a report to the BCOB in September with a recommendation on whether or not to support conversion to amalgamation with that system, and then a report around that same time to this committee, or possibly the subsequent cycle, recommending which 2 options should be carried forward to an assent process. So the report's being brought forward for information only, but we definitely welcome any feedback on this proposed approach. Any questions or?
Thanks, Chris. With Chair Grieve stepped out, would Director Hamir, we want to take over the Vice Chair? Are you Vice Chair, Director Robert? Director Robert, do you want to take over just for the minute here then?
I'll do it from here.
Sure.
Okay. Director Hamir, we have a question.
If staff could clarify, so my understanding is is it Watuco water supply system, they have enough quantity of water. They just don't have the enough filtration and cleaning capacity.
Yes, that's correct.
But the BCOB system does not have enough water. Like the well that you're trying to get
for peak demands.
For peak demands, but to add another 128 onto that system, the water would still come from the current infiltration gallery?
Yes. So there's two kind of principles that we've communicated as a result of this kind of considering the concept, and this is for BCOB. One is that it would only be supported by staff if that was the case, if we found a way to connect, and we have a concept for connecting their infiltration gallery to our system. So they would be bringing, and they have existing license capacity on that river. So yes, they have more than enough. We've confirmed they have more than enough water. There's a gap between what they consume and what their license capacity is. That would be of some use to the BCOB system. And then the second principle is that any costs associated with this conversion are borne by the Watuco system, so there's no additional cost to Black Creek Oyster Bay. So yeah, in answer to your question, yes, there is the assumption is that they'd be using their own water or bringing their water with them into a converted system.
So we'd be doing the treatment.
Right. So it would come out, be treated, and go back?
So because
Through
of
the big system.
Yeah, so there would have to be a direct connection from their infiltration gallery, their source, to ours. That's the only way we could treat the water before delivering it through our, kind of taking the long way around to Watuco. So it'd be a short connection, because their infiltration gallery is almost across the river from ours. Short connection there, then their water would go through our system and then get delivered back around.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just playing devil's advocate, if they have extra water and the BCOB needs water, how would that work? Would BCOB buying water from that system, or they're now going to be one system?
It would be one system. That's
okay.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's not a lot of excess water in their system, but there's some, and I think every little bit would help with the Black Creek Oyster Bay system.
Buy some time.
Yeah, and it certainly wouldn't be a overall draw on the existing capacity of the BCOB system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Director Arbor?
I really want to thank staff for bringing the Watuco water system to the EASC, and the chair. I think I may speak for Dr. Amir and I that that's the one service where we thought we wouldn't have to be involved in terms of Black Creek Oyster Bay, and it sounds like we now are. So that's going to be a lot of getting up to speed for myself. I think some of the questions that Dr. Amir is talking about, I'll probably have to share. We might end up suggesting a big bus tour. We've done a couple tours lately. Maybe we can do one with Strathcona and ourselves and go in the area to understand what better on the ground, what the water options are. I think we're all aware there's been difficulties in regards to the Black Creek Oyster Bay service. And what I get, unless you correct me from this meeting, is that ultimately what you're trying to do with Watuco by bringing it to ESC is to try to avoid it getting slowed down or, against Island Health deadlines and all that stuff. So try to find a different solution if need be.
Yeah.
So that if the problems with Black Creek Oyster Bay persist, then maybe we can find a solution. So that's what I'm getting from today. And for the rest, I guess we'll have to collaborate perhaps with the Black Creek Oyster Bay service at some point to have some discussions. Maybe if there's an opportunity for more information. I think it's the kind of thing that it's a very important public interest up there in Area C and for Strathcona. So I think the more information that you can send our way to bringing us to speed, the better. So yeah, thank you.
Director Amir?
Sorry, just one other question. The two commercial operations, is that Pacific Playgrounds itself is one of the commercial operations?
And the golf course, right?
And the golf course,
Okay.
that's right, yeah.
And is everyone metered, or how is the water shared?
No, so they're not metered currently, so we assume that has been carried as a cost, line item in the analysis.
Regardless.
Yeah, and then the conversion would include all those connections other than the Pacific Playgrounds, who they do have an existing groundwater well that they would plan to use, and the golf course.
Saratoga.
Yeah.
Mobile home park.
And the mobile home park.
Not the golf course.
Not the golf course. Okay.
Oh, is it? The golf course is on.
Usually golf courses
The
have their
public
own
system?
water systems, yeah.
Mobile home park is the other commercial use.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Thanks, Jay.
when you have a commercial user on a system like that, how is water allocated, or is it, or how is payment, I guess, made? Because I'm assuming those commercial operations use much more water than a residential, or do they just split it?
So we do have a different rate.
Okay.
And a slightly different tiered structure, but they would be metered and billed according to the bylaw that does distinguish between residential and commercial. Yeah.
Okay, one more? Yep.
I did read the McElhaney report, and their recommendation still stands. I mean, part of what they were basing their opinion of the ideal solution being the two join, and they actually talked about climate change in there as being a driver and the availability of water in the different area. So is that report is still current and is still, we don't have another engineering report?
No,
okay.
no, that's the most recent. The options as summarized in the staff report are slightly different.
Yeah.
And that's just
Because of the political or whatever situation.
Yeah, and our own just our own understanding of the situation and priorities, including those two principles that I mentioned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So yeah, you do understand that this has been going on since 2015, so the regional district's been working at a lightning pace to get it here in 2019. Of course, the concern, the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the issue of having to cross that river and hook up with our infrastructure in the Area D Park, which, of course, as I say, Area D Parks is standalone, only one director, so falls to the board. So therein lies the rub. I asked about, well, what about standalone option? Because the difference is about $100,000, right, or a bit over that, between the two options that make their own standalone system and the possibility of hooking up later on this side of the river. But the issue there, of course, is things like the head pressure is all different. So to get them equalized, you'd have to do quite a bit of work. But there is a sense of urgency here. We have to move on this. There's no recommendation. This is all for information. It's a tough one. In a perfect world, we would just join the infiltration gallery up with our infiltration gallery in with the new wells and have a combined system with with one set of staff working on it at all times and all that. But it's a difficult one. And underlying this whole thing is what might prove to be a temporary bump in the road, or it might turn into the Grand Canyon. I'm not sure at this point. So yeah, I mean it's one of the biggest challenges in my district for sure.
Just add one thing.
Yes, please.
Our assumption is that it is come this fall as far as the schedule that we've laid out in the report. It is kind of a fork in the roads for the service, and that we don't see much potential for them converging again in the future if the decision is made to have them go separate. Just given, as you mentioned, the costs are fairly similar, but the biggest cost when joining the BCOB is the capital improvement cost charge. If they go ahead and build their own treatment facility at a similar cost as you mentioned, there'll be major barriers to bringing them back together in the future, being the payment of those capital improvement cost charges. Yeah. So it does. We're seeing it as a clear divergence, depending on how the consultation goes over the next 2 or 3 months. Yeah.
We do have a request in for a ministerial meeting. You probably know that. Area D and Area C in the ministry on this.
Well, just offering from probably the two of us, but if there's need for extra support at any point for us to come to meetings or anything like that, just that can be part of both of our education and not having a specific interest deep down south with our own suite of problems. I'd be quite happy to come and offer kind of more neutral perspective if need be.
We might need water trucks.
We need water trucks, got it.
Okay. Nothing further. We'll vote on receipt. All in favor? That carries. Curbside. Don't call it curbside. Collection in electoral areas A, B, and C. Exactly. It was a big bone of contention. Those cappuccino sucking, bicycle riding urbanites.
Move receipt.
Second. Moving second on receipt.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sarah Wiley? Willie, I'm sorry. Sarah Willie is here to, she's part of our engineering team, and Sarah will be providing an update PowerPoint presentation on the curbside collection in areas A, B, and C staff report. Sarah.
Welcome. I'll get the right mic on for you here. Hold on. There we go.
Thank you, through the chair. So presenting today on considerations for expansion of collection at curbside to electoral areas A, B, and C. Thank you. So when staff presented the annual financial plan for the electoral areas to the EA directors, it was highlighted the great value that CVRD was providing to more than 1,000 residents of Royston by contracting on their behalf for the curbside collection of garbage and recycling. So this approach maximizes collection efficiency, reduces administrative burden on haulers by replacing multiple contracts with a single customer and giving them the confidence that they'll receive hassle-free payment for their service. So the result is that the CVRD contracted price of $116 per household per year without the Recycle BC incentive is far less than the comparable cost from a private hauler offering service in a nearby home. Quotes from haulers currently providing service for weekly garbage pickup in rural areas range between $487 and $550 per year. While the contracted service in other rural areas would likely be higher than the Royston rate due to density, it would include a higher level of service offering of both recycling and garbage at a minimum and potentially yard waste at a competitive rate. This initiative will support a reduction in regional greenhouse gas emissions by reducing individual trips to the Comox Valley Waste Management Center and streamlining the existing service by eliminating multiple trips down the same road. This, of course, was explored in 2013. So the expansion of curbside waste collection service beyond Royston was considered by the electorate. A referendum was held November 16th, 2013, which failed with 73% in opposition. The procurement process in 2013 was open to all haulers, was competitively bid. We received 3 bids, and it was evaluated based on price and service. It was to be awarded to one single hauler to optimize the administration of the contract and provide best value, pending the results of the referendum, of course. This single contract award approach would have had considerable impacts on one local company, Suncoast Waste, as well as to smaller mom-and-pop type waste haulers that are offering sort of a one-off service. In early 2019, Suncoast Waste sold their hauling business to Waste Management Canada. There's now only 2 companies, Waste Management and Waste Connections, that are offering subscription service to rural residents. And there's another company operating locally, Mterra Environmental, that does not offer a subscription service, but has indicated they would likely respond to a consolidated service request for proposals. These 3 large companies are headquartered elsewhere. However, they do all employ local drivers and administrators, and they have facilities in Cumberland and Campbell River. Some do have centralized call support services that are located out of region. Air quality has also been an emerging issue within the CVRD, and there's increased awareness by residents of the impacts of burning, which may include yard waste or garbage. Although the burning of garbage is not widespread, it does negatively contribute to the overall air quality of the valley, and it would take a collective effort to improve the air quality for the enjoyment of all Comox Valley Regional District residents. There are additional risks. Adding curbside collection of recycling to curbside garbage can improve diversion by making both equally convenient and helping to move towards our objective of 70% diversion. Recycle BC, though, is the organization responsible for the materials commonly accepted in curbside recycling programs, and they receive their funding from producers of packaging and support the depot and curbside collection of cardboard, paper, glass, metal, soft and hard plastics, with a focus on packaging. Recycle BC does not guarantee that they will fund any depot or curbside collection service that is put in place by a local government. However, in keeping with their commitment for continuous improvement and to achieve new ambitious program plan targets, they have stated they'll continue to pursue opportunities to expand their collection network, and they may offer the CBRD an incentive in the future for this expansion of service. The eligibility criteria, though, to join Recycle BC as an unincorporated area have not been fully established, and it's likely that we would be required to fund curbside recycling for a minimum of 2 years before an incentive may be offered. With demonstrated good participation rates, low contamination, we would likely further our ability to join and receive incentives in the future. There is the other risk, of course, that if we were to proceed, the electorate may not support the service, and additional expenditures would have been incurred in the process. Preliminary cost estimates to support the consultation, education, and approval process are estimated to be $60,000, but a final budget's dependent on the service delivery model, chosen ascent process, and level of public engagement that we choose. Funding for this initiative is to come from 3 feasibility study areas for electoral area A, B, and C, and any expenses incurred for this proposed service would need to be recovered by the service were it successful. So the 2013 referendum process incurred approximately $40,000 in expenses. If the service is established and the service is structurally the same, essentially, as it was in 2013, then all costs from 2013 and 2020 would have to be recovered through the service. There's different options available to do that if established, and one may be to see a payback over 5 years through the fee for the service. Another known risk is to the market. The consolidation of service contracts can impact small local haulers more than larger companies. Larger companies have the ability to reallocate equipment, personnel, whereas business models for smaller companies are based on servicing the needs of their local communities. So next steps at this time, reflecting back to the ascent process that was undertaken in 2013, we want to spend more time gauging the level of desire from the public for this service prior to making a recommendation to proceed with a public ascent process and or selecting a public ascent process. So we look forward to bringing additional information on the proposed curbside waste collection service, including service boundaries, contract approach, operating requirements, costs for delivering the service, and the public assent process recommendation. A communications engagement plan will be developed to support those decisions or those recommendations if we were to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have questions from Director Hamir.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Chair. And thank you for your presentation. So a couple of questions. The difference in costs, I understand Royston being close to the landfill and having a really good density is a very low price. Do you have an idea between their 116 and the around $500 that everybody else is paying, where our service would land? Like, are we thinking double? Like,
to give you an idea, when we did tender out the contract previously, it was around $150 per household.
That was like 2013, but still, that's great, a great price. I think the risk has certainly gone down now with Suncoast not there, and I think they were one of the ones that were mobilizing a lot of the resistance to this. Door knocking, that was one of the number one issues apart from wood smoke, that people were complaining about was compost pickup and recycling. So a couple of questions. If we did go forward with an actual ditch side pickup, the depots that we currently have, would those then be eliminated, or like we're paying for those pickup points already? So we could recover some of that by no longer having those costs. And then the second question was, can you explain that 2013 cost and why we would be paying for it now? Was it not funded back in 2013, or how was that process? How did that happen?
So in regards to the depots, I think that would depend on what service areas were put forward and were successful, and then we would look at whether those were overlaps or not, I think.
Okay.
But certainly that would be a potential. And then in terms of
Sorry,
the
Sarah, can I just jump in on that
costs,
one?
yeah,
As well,
that'd be
the
great.
depots, of course, are under our solid waste service, the CSWM service. So changes would happen through that function, of course. But I would echo what Sarah says around analyzing just coverage and need.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on the second, my understanding is because it was costs incurred for a proposed service, but that the service did not go forward, that those were carried forward within the financial budget each year.
Okay. Waiting for the service to finally come back. So actually, James has brought up a point. If we start a service here in the Comox Valley, how does this work in relation to Strathcona? Can we have a service and they not have curbside? Like what is the relationship there in terms of our level of service in there versus theirs?
Yeah, so, and correct me if I say
yeah.
anything wrong, James, but similar to how Royston functions now.
Okay.
So it's funded entirely through the fee-for-service that's applied directly to those residents receiving that service.
And does it need to be, does this service need to be approved by the Waste Management Committee? No? Oh,
No.
interesting. Okay.
And similarly, SRD has some similar services in Sayward and
Okay.
other places.
And the municipalities, of course, have curbside collection
Yeah,
as well.
that's
So,
true.
so it's
Okay.
a similar, I would think it's in a similar vein to the municipalities.
Okay. So one comment that was made on social media is the bear attraction that recycling and compost would have. Is it possible for staff to do some research on what other rural districts do to prevent bears? If there's a, if it's a timing issue that you can only have your waste out at 1 to 2 hours before pickup, or just how they eliminate bear attraction. Yeah.
Yep, for sure we can do that.
3-shot. Director Arbor?
Thank you for bringing this forward. Maybe the proposed term could be roadside collection?
Yes, first
Between
and
ditch
foremost.
and curb. I think curb, you're right, in the rural areas, that triggers other elements of our personalities.
Psyche.
Of our psyche. When you lose a referendum by 73%, and then you bring forward the exact same value proposition, you should be really worried. And I think that's what we're contemplating here. I happen to be one of the people that believes that that's a good value proposition, that it's the right thing to do. I've got a grand vision in my head of electric garbage trucks going around the rural areas, collecting, recycling garbage, as opposed to LNG. But the reality is many people don't feel that way. And in the rural areas, I know many people still feel like they would prefer to deal with their own garbage, go up to the dump, and then what that results is the people who do buy service end up paying quite a bit because you don't have universal coverage over there. And I think a lot of people are still reluctant to pay. So I would hate to go to referendum and lose it again. In the case of the way I've been wording it on the street the last few months since the Royston extension happened is we do have a public assent process, which is petition, right? And I think for me, if I think about Union Bay, Fanny Bay, and I see what happened with the Kilmarnock extension, then the electoral really own it because they had to work for it. And my message has been, we put ourselves out there in 2013, we lost miserably. Do I have the appetite to go back to an actual referendum? Not until we got a much greater sense that, it could be 70% for, which I don't think it is. So I think that idea of petitions, of empowering, of doing education and testing the field that way, neighbors talking to neighbors to see if they want to do it or not. To me, that's the mentality I was in until I saw this staff report. If we do want to go to referendum, I think it's true, but we have our own filters, right? I sense things have changed. A lot of people are talking, so on social media I have a lot of people that want it. But again, I think there's a big chunk of the electoral area, the electorate that actually will galvanize, maybe not like they did with this other company. But right now in area, we do have a third-party private company that's stepping up to the plate because there's been a gap left or whatever, and they're now offering a recycling option. Is Strathcona? Yeah, new company. I don't think they've operated. I'll send you the information. But they started doing some servicing in Fanny Bay, and so there you've got a private contractor, I think locally owned, that's stepping into the space. So to be verified, again, that this is through social media. The last couple of months I've heard that. So, you know, I'm definitely not saying no. I'm just saying that when you come back in the next iteration, I would like the one consideration to just, as part of gaining electoral approval, that one of those strategies is petitioning. Okay, and what would that look like from a CVRD? That would be mostly education, sharing of information, neighborhood by neighborhood. Would that be require the same amount of resources as doing a blanket referendum? I think when people referendum, I think a lot of people start thinking about government imposing stuff on them and trying to find a way to get there. And what we saw in the Kilmarnock extension was really much a grassroots movement of people saying, hey, we don't have recycling garbage. Is there a way for me to do this? They called Jake Mertens. They talked to all their neighbors. We didn't have to do any work. It cost us almost nothing because the residents did it. And now they have a great service. So just some thoughts. I think that's what you were looking for today. And I'm excited, actually, you brought it forward. That's good. I'm personally supportive, but I just don't want us to go to referendum and fail miserably. Thank you.
Rosina?
One other point, if I could make, to make this a slightly different service than what was proposed in 2013. We see that municipalities like Cumberland and even Courtenay now, the areas that, or not Courtenay, but Comox, that have compost collection, are considering reducing their garbage pickup to biweekly and having a weekly compost recycling pickup. So if we could leapfrog and just go to there and present that as a solution to bring some of the costs down, but have those extra levels of service around compost recycling, that might be something that kind of at least places this as something different. But I do agree that having, getting local communities to really sign on to this might be a way of getting a win. Because I see where the resistance tends to be is in the very rural areas where people like me, I'm not going to be sending my compost out because I compost and I keep that on farm, versus areas like that are quite dense, like the Virginia Drive, Huband area, where it is just like an urban subdivision where they don't. We do also have a very active clean air group right now too, which is a difference between now and 2013. And they would, I think, get behind this because of the reduction in burning of backyard, waste products. So there might be some, ways we could leverage what's happened in the recent year to move this, help us move this forward.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay. At one of the conferences I was at, they had Enid Slack from the University of Toronto talking about electoral approval and the fact that they have these ballot initiatives down in the States. And every 4 years they bring forward pretty much the same question. They try to frame it differently. First time is, well, we got to put a bridge across. Okay, what's it going to cost? It's going to cost $10 million. Oh, no, boom, defeated. Next year, well, geez, we really are having trouble bottleneck on that one bridge. We really got to put a bridge across. What's it going to cost? Oh, $20 million now. Oh, yeah, boom. Third time, it's like, we just got to put that bridge across, even if it is going to cost $40 million or whatever. And they voted in. So it's bringing people up to the door, putting their hand on the door handle and saying, do you want to turn it now? I think that people seem to think the status quo is sustainable when it's really not. So they just fall back on, well, I'm just going to vote no, and there'll be no repercussions, no ramifications, i.e. the South Sewer Project. Meanwhile, we're still polluting Brain Sound, right? In fact, it's getting worse. So when you have a yes/no, like you showed up there, that's a recipe for failure. I think you have to have other options. I totally agree with Arzina that it'd be great if we could leapfrog in. I don't know how far we are with the Strathcona bunch and our composting facility. At least a couple more years, I would think. So maybe this is a conversation best had in a couple of years. But I think you have to warn people. It's like the South Sewer. You got to say, no, this sewer's going to come. We're going to do something. Like with the sewer, you can say, well, we're going to have, mandatory on-site septic inspection. And if yours fails, you're on the dime to put the 20, 30 grand in to do your new system. Oh, well, I never thought of that. I just thought I could say no and just keep doing what I was doing for the last 20 years. No, it's not true. I think if you give people a horizon, you say, okay, it's coming. It's coming down the road. It's not going to be today, but we're going this way. We're saving our money for this project. We're going in this direction. It may be 2 years, it may be 4 years, but this is where we're going. Then eventually they get their heads around it. Also, yes, no, that doesn't work. It needs at least 3 options. So what about saying, okay, where the status quo is not sustainable? It's like our garbage composition report with our good friend from Area D who used to say, you're going to pull that compost out of my cold, dead hands. Everybody in my area composts. Well, who had the highest amount of recyclable and compostable material in the garbage bag? Guess what? It rides around in an opaque bag. You can't see what's inside, but it's still there, So maybe one of the options would be, okay, if you're so enamored by the private sector and the private sector is going to do a better job, let's see what they would charge you to do a private pickup of recycling, maybe recycling compost and garbage and residuals, So, geez, it's going to cost $500. But if there's no, I don't know if we even have the legislative authority to say there will be no more recyclables in your garbage bag. Or do the penalties fall on the hauler? We're going to do random checks. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. You have to pay a fine of $10,000 this month. What do we have for the stick? And the other thing, of course, was the fact that we've learned an awful lot about messaging and PR. It was, take a look at zinc when we did the water treatment plant. It went through without a whimper. And I remember the board of the day, were totally against that sort of thing. Well, guess what? They're all diselected. So, we've got an opportunity to message it properly, to put the timeline far enough out, maybe to wait until we have the option for compostable materials, because Nanaimo have been doing this for ages. It's been over 20 years. They've been, beans to bowl in the box stuff down there, and everybody does it in the rural areas. So, it's, I don't know how you guys feel, but I think we got to tread slowly on this and make sure we get the people up to speed, make sure we get the communication strategy well in advance. We're not going to go to referendum in October. Arzina?
Well, to that, so my question to staff is that something that we can do to ban recyclables from the garbage stream and then leave it up to the electorate? How do you want to do this? Would you like the CVRD to do your pickup? Would you like a private hauler to do your pickup? So just frame it in that direction.
And organics are coming.
And organics are coming, FYI.
They're next.
Yeah.
Recyclables are already banned from the landfill. And so it would take additional enforcement of the loads coming in and pushing that back a bit more. But that is the tool that we see this service benefiting, is that by having more consistent service to customers, it enforces our ability to improve on in the future, for example, banning organics or that sort of thing?
Well, I think I've told this story before. When we got our puppies, they were getting into everybody's garbage, and we were able to see how much recyclables were in everybody else's garbage. So to what extent do we have the ability to monitor the haulers and what they're bringing in? Because there must be a lot of non-compliance within the haulers.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much enforcement we're doing at the face. I'd have to speak with Jesse about that. But certainly at the tipping bin wall, where we have staff actively interacting with the public, we do have different rates for waste with recyclables and waste without. So we do impose higher rates for customers who are choosing not to comply.
But that's done through SWM, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so we'd have to bring it up at that board.
Just if I can add to the comments about the yes/no question and establishing the service. Legislation is very prescriptive in that to establish a service, we need the electors to say yes, and that can be done through a referendum, AAP, or a petition process. I think that's what makes the public participation prior to that final point in time where you're asking the question so important, so we can understand what the interests are, what the opportunities are, and have more of a dialogue. It's challenging on a large level, on a large area, but certainly the public participation leading up to whatever your chosen form of elector approval is so important. So I think this recommendation, or the staff report, talks about working towards next fall, so a full year out, and it seems a long ways away, but that provides for lots of time to have this dialogue and understanding and get this committee comfortable and sort of consider all those options moving forward.
Can you take it as direction to staff to consider the things we talked about?
Of course, I've taken notes and seeing heads nod, yes.
Yeah. Daniel?
Yeah, we have minor variances in views in the direction, I think, but they're minor.
That's how we disagree.
They're minor. Yeah, no, I think looking a year out is good. I'll continue to engage with a couple of our densified communities about that recent success, and I almost had a group that was going to start looking for a petition in the Fanny Bay area, and so they haven't gotten fully organized. But then it died back, and then just in the last month, it's arose again. And so I've given Jake Merton's contact info if they want to learn from Kilmarnock. So in that 1 year, I'll keep working on that front while the staff looks at all the options. But I really saw a lot of value in people taking ownership, and I think Dr. Hamir's comments around some of those dense areas might make a little more sense to focus, because some of the comments I receive elsewhere, exactly, like I got so much stuff, I got a big lot, and we have a lot of stuff, so for us, we can't even put stuff at the road because it's big things or whatnot, and so we do go to. So before we commit, but basically what you're saying in conclusion is that you would like us to consider perhaps allocating feasibility dollars for next year from our areas, and that budget process would start in October or November. In the meantime, does that mean that you'll just do nothing because there's no funds allocated to this, or you'll still kind of maybe present another staff report at some point, or what do you see the process like unfolding?
Yeah, I'd have to consult with Andrew on that one as to how he can commit on my time. But
Yeah.
Just a sec. This mouse is dead. You have to yell.
Yeah, it's okay. So the plan is to continue to gather information, understand what we could do, and work with staff. Not spending any funds per se, but just to have some staff time to work towards bringing that report, and then having the budget set for the fall session. So.
All right.
And if we have And if we have an EAC strategic planning session, this would be a perfect theme to bring to the table. All right, thank you.
Okay. On receipt. All in favor? And recommendation as it sits? Okay. Okay, good. Yeah, it's moving. Ah, there you go.
I'll move that staff bring forward additional information on the proposed roadside waste collection service within the Comox Valley Regional District electoral areas, including service boundaries, contract approach, operating requirements, cost of service delivery, and public assent process. And further, that staff identify the specific funding requirements to be allocated in the 2020 financial plan from each of the feasibility services for Bain Sound, Denman, Hornby Islands, Electoral Area A, Lazo North, Electoral Area B, and Puntledge Black Creek, Electoral Area C, to support the necessary public assent process and communication efforts.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? That carries. Okay, last one, Community Works Fund Status Report.
Second.
Any discussion on the community funds?
Just to say, to reiterate, I would love to see some more feasibility, like more strategic planning, I mean, around the remaining funds.
We didn't say thank you. Sorry.
No, not at all. That how the unspent funds are going to be used. I'd love to see some more planning around that.
Yes, I agree. We've been lax. And Director Barber.
Technically, I think it's James' job to say thank you. No, just kidding. When they left. It's just usually I always see Russell say, oh, thank you. And then they leave. That's right.
He's a bad acting. Bad actor.
Yeah. Oh, he's taking those as well. Busy guy today. Sheesh. Thank you,
He's doing
James.
both jobs.
So, yeah, no, I want to second that in terms of the, and then my only question is perhaps, no, it is answerable because Mark Rutten is here perhaps. So we committed to hold back the Area A and Area C amounts for the master sewer strategy related to the situation in the south. We don't call it South Sewer anymore. And so I think we is it to December 31st that we, or I know if I'm not mistaken, we were hoping to get some feasibility documents in the spring, summer. Now it's summer, fall. Is there any chance it's going to become fall, winter in regards to the work that's being done around those pieces? So what I'm asking, is there a chance that we will be asked to re-extend those amounts another year? Because they're significant amounts.
Mm-hmm. Through the CAO and through the chair, it's a hard question to answer. So we are planning to bring reports forward in the fall, governance reports and the cost of the impact to the sewage commission or the Brent Road treatment plant. So governance for bringing Area A into the service and cost impacts to sewer. We're planning to bring that forward in the fall, kind of in conjunction with other governance work that's happening. But the timing is difficult to predict. It's taken us a bit longer even to get to this point. I could see it slipping past the end of the year. And so, I guess it's yes, there could be a request to, further commit those funds for a longer period of time. I just don't know for sure exactly how that timing is going to work out.
So if I may, hopefully we're not too far off topic because it is an item on there, but when you say we've hit some slowdowns on that work, I imagine, well, I can hardly imagine that there'd be technical slowdowns. So when we're looking at cost estimates for bringing the South potentially in, or potential impact on volume on Brentwood, I think those are. So is it something else that's slowing down this work, or is it on the governance piece perhaps, or just so I have some idea of what may be taking longer?
Both right now. On the technical work, the technical work on assessing the impacts to the treatment plant has been delayed just because the technical side of the project has delayed. So we've kind of paused the conveyance work. We're doing more consultation with Comox First Nation at this time. We're kind of paused for that work to complete, pick up the force main conveyance work, and then move to impacts to the treatment plant. So that whole technical side is kind of bumped back, several months.
Yeah.
On the governance side, not so much. We wanted to be aligned with the main governance work that's happening.
Yeah.
It's not that we have to be aligned with it, but we thought there were some benefits to kind of bringing it all forward at a similar time period, maybe not exactly at the same meeting, but just so that it was the full discussion on everyone's mind at that time. So that's the reason for that.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's sufficient for today in terms of community works. It's a heads up in a way that you're giving that perhaps it might have to extend.
And
those amounts, it's just that those amounts have been there for how many years now?
Yeah, quite a while. And the other thing I think,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, the other thing to think about for us, for yourselves and for staff, is those amounts were supplementing a large grant.
Correct.
They were not meant to be used on their own.
Correct.
To progress the creation of a service.
Yes.
So that's another factor that has happened since they were committed. So we are going to have to bring back a plan of attack for South Sewer, if that's what we still call it. Once we know if the governance is accepted and if treatment at Brent Road is accepted, then we need to bring back a plan and timeline for how this will be implemented, which would include the commitment of community works funds. What do we need them for? How much do we need? Grants are always going to be required to make this project successful, I would say, based on my knowledge of the cost. So we do probably owe you a report in the fall to say, here's the plan of attack, here's what we know now, and here's what we suggest for community works funds commitments in the future.
Yeah, because, I mean, it goes back to Dr. Amir's comment about the need for, if there hasn't been an ESC strategy, but to go back to it, because what is getting lost in the meantime, in the event that this does not happen, is there's a huge opportunity cost. I mean, I'm sitting on $1 million of area funds that could go to multiple projects to better the lives of residents in my area. Of course, the sewer project is a very desirable, potentially, even though it was also turned down by the electorate. So what I mean is, ideally, I know now I realize everything you say that's going on in the broader valley in regards to the sewage. We're at the back of the queue, so to speak, for Area A, but at the same time, for me, if the time comes to have a conversation about another year extension, my question will be, well, will it be a year extension after that, and what do grants look like, and perhaps we won't even have the information, and then we'll start bumping into the next election cycle. So just a caution, and again, I think that's why I would love the CESC strategic planning session this fall, so that not only on this thematics, but on a number of thematics that we kind of gets our duck in a row a little better. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and if I'm reading it correctly, I threw $1 million in with Area A, and I got $408 left, $408,000 left out of my investment, correct?
So again, if I may, and I'm going to undermine Area A and the sewer project, but think about what those funds could do to the Watetco situation or other projects that could use community works. I think that's the kind of discussions I want to have in the fall.
We did get some reimbursement for the money spent on that, didn't we? And the engineering's still valid on the collection end of it.
I would have to go back and look.
I thought we got some money back anyway, we'll find out, because that's some of the good questions I want to ask too. And I've been asking this question in jest for the last 3 years and have not got a straight answer. So, anything else?
Your support's been very appreciated, Dr. Grieve.
Yeah, well, I'm going to ask for a reciprocal support when we do our North Sewer project.
2028, I will be there.
I won't be. Okay. On receipt, all in favor? And that carries, and we don't have anything but new business. And I think we have a motion on new business from Director Arbor and seconded by Director Amir.
Yeah, it would be a request for staff to come back in August with options for a strategic EASC session in the fall as part of strategic plan.
And we should have our infrastructure report by then too, right? So we'll know where we're at. The utility one,
The,
our assessment.
our, the report that was just here, the.
On Royston and
The asset management.
assets.
We'll get that in August, yeah, in August.
Okay.
Yep.
All in favor? That carries. Okay, so motion to adjourn to in camera. Can we grab some lunch? Is there lunch here, you said? Okay. Can we, okay to have a working lunch?
So, but I'd like a 2-minute.
Okay, yeah, okay. So in camera, all in favor?